Hello there, my name is Smith and I am a clone trooper. My squad recently crash-landed here, and it would seem that I am the only one to have survived the crash. Our pilot had a piece of steel lodged in his gullet, and our captain's heart exploded upon impact with the ground. Even worse so, it would appear that we are going to be fighting endless waves of separatist battle droids. We do have about 5 days before their first attack. It does seem that this planet is populated with many an outlander, so at least we have some people to befriend and also to do some trading with. Now, given the fact that we crash-landed here, we are going to be starting with absolutely nothing except for the corpses of our fallen comrades, and of course the resources that we could get from our shuttle, and the trees, and other rooms in the area, and, you know, stuff like that, obviously. Now, speaking of which, one of these rooms was quite large, and thus I decided that we should probably go ahead and try to repurpose it into something of a base, at least for the time being, but we'll see where it goes. One of the first major things that we're focusing on, of course, is power production, so we built a small little courtyard in the southern part of the ruins for our solar panels, and then the rest of the area is going to be our actual base where we eat, sleep, and everything else. Which does unfortunately mean that we are going to be sharing a cooking space with our storage area for all of our other resources. It's going to be quite ugly, but oh well. We also ended up having a mad rat, which was pretty easy to take care of, and then it would end up becoming our dinner for the night, so that was cool. Now, within our base, we're actually building some embrasures into the walls, as well as a concrete wall to hide behind for additional cover. Now, I think this should be more than enough for the first few waves, or so I thought. Before the first wave would come, I would end up burying the pilot and our captain, just to show a bit of respect, and also so we don't have the debuff of having unburied colonists. Going to bed that night, I had no idea what await me in the morning, for wave 1 would come, and all hell would break loose. These were not simple battle droids, these were super heavy battle droids, and a lot of them for a first wave, I thought. Since it seems as though they'll be preparing for a while, we would take some of the wood that we had and go ahead and prep up a few spike traps for their arrival. Based on how many enemies there were for this first wave, something tells me that we're in for a lot of trouble. Nevertheless, we would hide around the corner of a small hill here and begin firing at them with our blaster rifle, trying to back up just a little bit where we could lead them through the spike traps if there were any left, which thankfully there wouldn't be any. Maybe I overestimated them and I was just worrying too much. For our first reward, I would choose to have a xeno-human join us, and they landed shortly thereafter, being a furry specimen. Unfortunately, they had only landed with a knife, but I suppose they'll be good moral support. Something tells me them getting a little bit too close with that to a super heavy battle droid isn't the best idea. But, of course, they could help out around the base quite a bit by helping us build our very own rooms, as well as some proper lighting, and we would also allow her to go about deconstructing and smashing all of these battle droids for some steel. Resources are a very precious commodity when you're being attacked every single day, so we'll take them any way we can get them. Wave 2 would eventually arrive, and this time around we had quite the variety of different types of droids, being B1, B2, super heavy battle droids, so on and so forth, and even a shielded droidica. These next few waves are really gonna suck, huh? Given just how many droids there really were, I didn't want to try to use my embrasures that were built into the base as the defenses, because sitting there and doing that is going to cause a lot of damage to the base, and my rifle seems to have a decent bit of distance compared to the droids' rifles, so I just kind of ran around and fired at them, staying out of their range. And eventually, this ended up working. Since the droids do not drop the weapons that they are carrying, I thought for an extra reward that we should choose a poor level weapon drop, and that's exactly what I did. We ended up getting a blaster sniper rifle for our furry companion. Perhaps she won't be so useless after all now. Felt like a good time to spruce the base up a little bit, so we ended up building ourselves a large battery to store all of our excess power, and we even built ourselves a little nice table with some stools so that we could eat all of our meals that we're cooking. But I'm afraid all the lollipops and sunshine are about to go away as the third wave was here, and it would seem that these special droids have not only grenades and a lot of them, but also some sniper rifles, meaning that our little ranged tactics aren't going to work. This time around, ground, we would actually have to utilize our cover properly. The only issue was they were using these hypersonic grenades and blowing our base to bits, meaning that very shortly they'll no doubt be infiltrating. And it was because of their destructive capabilities we decided to leave the cozy cover of our base and try to take this fight outside to a more open field. But I'm afraid it was a bit too late, as many of the droids had already made their way inside our base and they were absolutely wreaking havoc upon it. Nevertheless though, the idea here of course was to try to lead them away from the base as much as possible and into our wooden spike traps, and with our furry companion hitting the ground after being shot several times, this seemed to be about the only way that we would be able to come out victorious, which we finally would thankfully, but that was a close call. Thank the Lord that one of our rewards was to delay the next wave by 3 days, which obviously was going to be my choice here, otherwise we probably wouldn't have survived. First things first, we need to make sure that our little hairball here doesn't bleed to death. Once I knew she was safe and sound, it was time for me to heal my own wounds. Thanks to my body glove and advanced clone armor, I'm not so easy to kill. And with that, it was time for us to begin rebuilding our base. Now, I'm gonna level with you. If you're the type of person that doesn't like seeing me have to rebuild the base after a few more waves, or after every single wave, you're not gonna like this, I'd say. We would also spend a good bit of time collecting more resources like mining steel, in addition to all of the droids that we were going about smashing for a little bit of steel as well. And the reason being because not only are we repairing the base, but we are also upgrading the base during this time, making room for more embrasures and even more turrets. Well, I say more turrets, but at the moment we only had enough time and resources to go about building one of them, which was an autocannon, thankfully. It would seem that this wave is mostly comprised of super heavy battle droids once more, this time coming from two separate areas, the southwest and the northeast. We decided that we would take on the smaller group of two super heavy battle droids first, of course killing them quite easily, and then we would move on to the much larger group, which was going to be much more difficult. Now, during this time, we were trying to lead them towards where our autocannon could fire at them, and of course we did, but eventually the autocannon would be destroyed, even though we luckily won the day. This time around, once again, for our reward, we would choose yet another poor weapons drop, as I wanted to try my luck, and I'm quite glad I did, as we got some pretty decent melee weapons. If I'm not mistaken, I think this electric staff here should end up causing the droids, when they get into melee combat with us, to be stunned at least for a brief period of time. We began collecting more resources, as right now with these raids we are currently in a 2 steps forward and 1 step back type of situation where we are just barely getting ahead after every single attack against us, and as you can see we are having to rebuild our autocannon, but we're also building some more mini turrets that should help us out quite a bit. Using a lot of the steel that we've been collecting though, not only would we be building turrets, but we would also end up building some plate armor and a helmet for our hairy lady here. It obviously was nothing like the clone armor that we currently have on, but it's better than her just being naked and having her hairy hide fried. But don't look now, for Wave 5 has finally arrived, and there's a new type of droid. These teeny little fellas apparently don't have any ranged capabilities, but there do appear to be a holy shit ton of them, so that might cause some issues. As they were prepping for the attack, I was hoping we'd have enough time to go about building ourselves yet another mini turret, but it doesn't look like that's going to be the case, and worst of all, it looks like there's another group of them coming from the western side, which I had no idea about because I don't pay enough attention, I suppose. So not only are we going to be dealing with the group that we already knew about, but the other group has made their way inside of our base, and they are absolutely destroying everything. Apparently these drones specialize in sabotage, being able to get into small crevices and deconstruct crucial components in electronics. which seems to be what they're attempting to do with our turrets. So we came outside of our defenses and our base to try and take them on, specifically in the hopes of giving our turrets a better shot at them and drawing them into their line of fire, of course, but also hopefully to try and prevent them from destroying all of our hard work in the base, or at least more hard work than they already have destroyed. It was a hard-fought battle for the most part, but thankfully, since none of them had any range capabilities, at the end of the day, once again, we would end up winning, and it was time for our reward. We ended up going with yet another random normal reward, as I didn't feel that leather or weapons was really needed at this point, and we would have yet another Xeno-human end up joining us. They ended up being a hussar by the name of Maguire, wielding a shotgun. I'm glad that they came ready to fight, because, well, that's all we really do here. This time around, not only were we rebuilding most of the base that was destroyed, but thankfully there wasn't too much destruction compared to, well, previous destruction, I guess, and we were just kind of expanding with a new room and stuff like that. Winter is just around the corner, and assuming we can actually survive until then, we are going to need a little stockpile of food, so we started tilling up some of our own land and growing some rice on it. In the final hours before the next wave, we finally got all of our turrets online, and I think we are really rocking and rolling. Once again, mostly comprised of super heavy battle droids. I was actually quite shocked to see that this wasn't that very large of a raid, and I was also kind of surprised to see that they immediately started fighting with a trade caravan that was leaving the area, slaughtering every single person. Impressively though, it would seem that the humans managed to take out at least about 3 or 4 of the battle droids before they all got killed. So, I guess they kinda helped us. Once again, thanks to our superior range and the fact that we mostly had blaster sniper rifles adding to that superior range, we wouldn't have much trouble taking on the heavy battle droids from a distance, but we did have a bit of trouble hitting them as these rifles were still pretty inaccurate for the most part. Unfortunately, this would culminate in our hairy companion being murdered by them. Still, in the heat of battle, we had absolutely zero time to grieve. We were doing the tried and true tactic of staying on the outside of the base and leading them around it so that our turrets could fire from inside the embrasures to try and destroy as many as possible. And as you can imagine, once again, this would cause us to end up losing many of our turrets like our autocannon once more. Eventually though, as the rain continued pouring on our weary heads, we had whittled their numbers down just enough and were continuing to stay just out of their firing range, and we finished them off. Since we've been struggling with food a little bit, I thought I would go for a food drop. Most of our time is spent trying to prep our rice and grow it and all that stuff, so obviously this will help with that. But before we continue, we would also end up laying our Itikan friend to rest, as she was a true companion to us, loyal till the very end. I noticed among the corpses of the Outlanders who were visiting us, they had an EMP launcher, which would be great against the droids, and of course they had many other different types of weapons like grenades and some assault rifles, which might come in handy as they can fire much faster than our blaster snipers. I also realized I made a big mistake by choosing a food drop as our reward, because these Outlanders already had a lot of food, most of them actually being some lavish and fine meals. Whoopsie poopsie. We would go ahead and begin making ourselves a machining table. This would make it much faster for us to go about deconstructing and tearing apart all of these droids for their resources, and we're hoping to maybe be able to build a mortar in the future, so we'll need this for shells. Wave 7 was finally here though, and as the rain continued to pour down, making visibility pretty piss poor, we had a very large raid of these little melee droids coming right for us. We attempted to use our EMP cannon as much as possible, but since the explosion splash damage wasn't all that large of an area, it was kind of useless and we would have to stick to our blasters. As Maguire was making his way away from this area, poor Smith had been completely surrounded, so much so that we had him start chucking some grenades to hopefully try to kill as many as he could. He would have to switch to his vibro axe before finally Maguire would once again come to his aid with his assault rifle, And it looks like we may have just survived this one. For the reward, I went with yet another poor weapons drop because, well, we didn't need animals and we had a lot of food already. Pretty glad we did, as well as we ended up getting an assault-style blaster, which would be perfect for McGuire, as it is very similar to the one that Smith has, and this allows us to shoot much faster. You may also notice that, as I mentioned earlier, we survived the wave, but it looks like Smith's armor has finally had the lick. Now, even though our EMP launcher wasn't working all that great like we had hoped to, we did want McGuire to have his own source of being able to stun the droid, so we ended up making some EMP grenades for him. I was hoping these might come in handy for Wave 8, but as opposed to previous waves where we've actually had the battle droids coming in large clusters, this time around they are all scattered all across the map, and as you can see, they were making their way towards us slowly but surely. At this point, the wave was starting to feel a little bit like a tower defense simulation, but as more and more of the battle droids began forming up in these hordes around the base, things started getting a little bit more serious. At this point, we were about to be completely overwhelmed, so realistically, my only strategy here was to wait until I noticed that a lot of these droids weren't really on one section of the base. We were trying to keep them away from the walls, and we would hop out and pick them off one by one, and at first this was actually going fairly well, as you can see. But as the battle continued to progress, we were taking more and more damage, becoming injured every few moments, and finally, as we hopped out to try to pick a few more of them off, McGuire was killed and Smith was downed. Things were beginning to look very grim, to say the least, as Smith tried to crawl back inside to his bedroom. We ended up having a mysterious man in black, something of a desperado wielding some revolvers, and we were quite happy to see him, nevertheless what his backstory was, or whatever, until the droids blasted him into oblivion and we were right back where we were. We should eventually be fine regardless. Now, I know Smith is looking pretty worse for wear, but luckily most of his injuries are simply burns and bruises, so unless he gets an infection, he shouldn't be bleeding out or anything like that. We had a lost refugee offering to come here and help us out for a few days, and I suppose at this point the game and the community all around the planet were just trying to send someone to us to help us out, but this gentleman as well tried to get the jump on the droids and was killed. Yeah. Smith was finally back up on his feet though, and immediately began tending to his wounds so that they would heal up quicker, and we would sneak him out into the base when the droids weren't all around us to grab his weapons once more. It also appears that I was incorrect about the refugee, as he hadn't actually died and he was simply injured. So I thought, hey, maybe he could help us out as well, and we'll sneak him out of his bedroom and allow him to grab weapons, and we'll shoot our way out of here, but yeah, he ended up actually dying this time. Oopsie poopsie. It goes without saying that this wasn't exactly an ideal situation. If we were to jump out a little bit too soon, Smith here is going to end up dead for real this time, so we thought it might be a good idea for him to bide his time and just repair to his walls when needed so that they didn't break in on him. By morning, we were finally able to sneak out to the front of the base and grab our blaster, a proper weapon this time around, along with the EMP grenades. Now, there were only a few more of these battle droids alive, so using the grenades, we would attempt to stun them and then quickly swap over to our blaster and fire at them. We managed to down one, and then the other two ended up knocking us down. As Smith was crawling back for his life into his room, he quickly got back up on his feet. His body glove is doing a lot of work right now, but like clockwork, here came another droid, and they finally shot him to the ground this time, where he's crawling once more. I was getting a little bit sick and tired of seeing Smith stand up and get shot back down, so I brought in reinforcements. Okay, so yeah, maybe I cheated and brought in my very own clone Space Marine, but let's be honest, this video was about to end if I didn't, and I'm still not done having fun. For our reward, we ended up going with having a new colonist join us here, and it was just a normal old human dual-wielding knives. Once again, I don't think those are going to be very useful, but we'll get this pretty lady a nice blaster. However, in her pocket, she does seem to have some combat stims, which are going to be very, very vital vital for, well, combat, as these are going to enhance our fighting capabilities. Or at least I sure hope so. That is indeed the plan, because Wave 10 is just around the corner. As a matter of fact, here it is, and it would seem that we have many of these specialist assassin-style droids wielding sniper rifles and many a sonic grenade. Several of them, I might add, coming in multiple different groups from multiple different angles. This should be interesting. Adding to the complexity of the situation, we also have a trade caravan of Outlanders who have just entered the area. Perhaps they'll be able to assist us with fighting off these droids. Either way, something tells me that this might not end in our favor. Nevertheless, we must try. Night fell and would begin with blaster fire ringing out across the mountains of these lands as we began engaging with the squad coming from the eastern side. In the north, the Outlanders would encounter their own group of these droids, managing to take out quite a few of them, though their numbers were dwindling very quickly, especially given the fact that many of these assassin droids were sniping them from a distance. Smith was on the move and we were about to attack the southern group when he lost his head. Quite literally, as one of these snipers had taken it off. I told you he'd end up dying, didn't I? And to be fair, with everything he went through earlier, I'm surprised this is when it happened. I think some combat stims might be able to help us alleviate the situation a little bit, as we still have many of these droids absolutely pouring in on us. And when I say that, I am not just exaggerating. Our base has been completely compromised and is wide open, with many of these assassin droids absolutely flooding in that we're trying to get rid of by firing upon them, of course, with our blasters and taking cover when necessary. Eventually, by the end of the night, we were victorious finally once more. As for our rewards, we ended up going with a fuel drop this time around, as I plan on making some mortar shells with them. The first thing that we did was end up burying Smith. He was truly and utterly a hero, and we wouldn't have gotten this far without him, that's for sure. I had also noticed that one of the Outlanders in their death had dropped a reinforced barrel, which was great for a mortar, and it also meant we wouldn't have to manufacture our own. We quickly threw together some shells, and then once those were completed, we actually began fixing up the mortar itself, and here's hoping that our enemies all come in groups. It seems like there's going to be a lot of them here, as you can see, so I was pretty hopeful. For the remainder of our time before the 10th wave, we were just working on our base, trying to double up our walls and defenses and things like that. We had absolutely no time to go about building any turrets, but with the sheer number of enemies we were about to be facing, it wouldn't have mattered anyhow. Unfortunately, our companion went into something of a psychite binge and or daze, and so she's basically going to die within moments of the wave starting, no doubt. We could try to arrest her, but that's going to just be a complete waste of time. As wave 10 began, I realized our mortar was going to be completely useless, as we had a lot of droids dropping in, and I do mean a lot, and they were all scattered all throughout the map. We would rush to our embrasures as the battle began, sticking pretty close to our pod in case we need to make a quick escape, when I realized our lady in the flak jacket was killed as we predicted. Looks like it's just going to be me and these filthy damn droids. I tried to kill as many as possible, I truly did, but as I'm sure you'll notice, we were outnumbered, easily outnumbered, and we were about to be overwhelmed very, very quickly, so we made a quick rush to our pod. Well, I must say, that's not exactly how I expected this to go. I didn't think that the Separatists would be so damn powerful sending in their endless waves of droids like this. I thought we might start out with 1 or 2, instead I think we started out with like 8 to 10. So, there's that, but I hope you have enjoyed. We may end up continuing this. Be sure to let me know if you want that in the comment section down below, as we haven't lost our clone Space Marine just yet. He's only landed nearby. Perhaps we attempt to start anew, or maybe try to make allies with the Outlanders, or something. But until then, I'll see you later. Goodbye.